Have you ever believed that a simple drawing, made with charcoal on old paper in the middle of a noisy park, could change the heart of a billionaire, and even start a national charity campaign? If you're looking for a story that touches your heart, carrying the breath of kindness, art, and the simple wonders of life, then you're in the right place. Before we begin, don't forget to hit subscribe on the Heart Glow channel, a place that holds small stories, but ones that can brighten your entire day, because who knows, just once you listen, your heart might be redrawn. In a small, sun-dappled corner of Echo Park, where the speeding cars leave behind quick flashes of life, a young girl sits curled up under an old maple tree. Her name is Mia. Once, that name was called out proudly in the art halls of the University of California. She was an outstanding student in fine arts, always immersed in colors, lines, and big dreams of a solo exhibition in a gallery downtown. But then, the storm came without warning. When her father fell into debt due to business failure and her mother became seriously ill, everything seemed to be swept away in an instant. The small house where she grew up was seized by the bank, her mother couldn't survive, and her father disappeared in silence, leaving Mia lost in the vast city. Scholarships weren't enough to cover everything. So Mia dropped out of school, taking a few charcoal pencils, some remaining drawing paper, and an old suitcase containing her entire life. She wandered from train stations to park benches, from one day to the next, her eyes, once bright with hope, now tinged with exhaustion. Yet, in those eyes, there remained one thing that would never fade, the love for painting, and the longing to touch someone's heart with just one picture. Every morning, when the sunlight touched the dewy leaves, Mia was already in the park. She chose a spot near the lake, where the crowds were many but still quiet enough to hear the rustling of leaves and the slow pace of life. Mia spread out a blanket on the cement ground, placed a few old charcoal boxes beside a small board, a board where she had handwritten, "Portraits, pay what you can." Not because she didn't need money, but because she wanted her drawings to reach anyone, even the poorest. Beside her was an old violin missing strings, once owned by her mother, who played it every night to lull her to sleep. Some days, she drew 4 people. Some days, no one stopped by. On those days, she sat silently, watching the shadows of people pass by, like cold fragments of a city that had never looked back. Still, Mia kept drawing. She drew people reading books, couples holding hands, elderly people pushing shopping carts. She always looked deeply into their eyes, seeking something beyond the surface, because for Mia, a portrait wasn't just a face, it was a soul. And each time she finished a drawing, she handed the picture with both hands, gently as if returning something that someone had unintentionally lost, their true image, seen through eyes free from judgment. Living on the margins was never easy. On rainy days, Mia sat soaking wet under a tarp, charcoal smudging on the paper. Passers-by would just glance at her, their eyes cold or filled with pity, as if her existence were an unwanted stain in the picture of the city. Once, a group of young people passed by, laughing mockingly, "Street artist? Think you're Van Gogh?" Then they walked off, leaving behind a coin clinking on the ground like a cheap token of pity. Those coins weren't enough to buy a loaf of bread, but they were enough to make her heart heavier. Some people stopped only to ask the time, then walked away when she looked up with hopeful eyes. Others looked at her drawing and shook their heads, saying "Doesn't look like me at all," and walked off without a word. Each time, Mia clenched her pencil, swallowing her frustration. But then, she would remind herself, "It's okay. I still have my hands. I still have light in my heart." Though she had grown used to being forgotten, deep down, Mia had never stopped hoping that someone would stop, truly see her, just as she always looked into the souls of others through every stroke. Amid the indifferent gazes and mocking laughter, there were still tiny rays of light sneaking into Mia's life like sunbeams in a winter day. She would always remember the first time she drew a young mother, holding a 2-year-old child in her arms, her face tired but her eyes full of love. The mother stopped when she saw the sign "Pay What You Can," and gently asked, "Can you draw my daughter? She doesn't have any pictures except the ones on my phone." Mia smiled, her hands trembling slightly from emotion, and carefully captured every thin strand of hair, every innocent feature of the child sleeping on her mother's shoulder. When the mother received the picture, she cried, then placed a crumpled $10 bill into Mia's hands along with a tight, wordless hug. There was also a time when a little boy in a superhero costume came near her, curiously watching every line she drew, then sat still like a statue for Mia to sketch him. After receiving the drawing, the boy yelled, "I look just like Superman, Mom." His eyes shining with joy, as if he had just received a precious Christmas gift. Those moments, though brief, were etched deeply in Mia's heart, becoming the reason she woke up early every day, sat in her usual spot, and continued to believe that, though small, her art was still reaching someone's heart. By day, it was the park, with pencils and rare smiles. But by night, Mia's life became raw and cold beyond belief. She had no home, no bed. Her familiar sleeping place was an old bus stop, where the yellowish light always flickered, as if tired itself. She spread her worn jacket on the bench, wrapped a scarf around her head to shield herself from the wind, and clutched the bag containing her pencils, paper, a few cookies, and the portrait of her mother, as if hugging her remaining world. The sound of horns, people shouting, and the distant bells of streetcars made it hard to sleep, but Mia was used to it. She even named the stray cats around her, to give herself the feeling that she wasn't alone. In the afternoons, she often stopped by the sandwich shop a few blocks away from the park, where a young chef, aware of her situation, would leave her an unsold sandwich and a bottle of water. "Are you drawing today?" he would ask, and Mia would always nod, even though her hands sometimes trembled from hunger. But strangely, even in those hardships, the fire of art in Mia never faded. She still drew every night, under the dim light, on paper, cardboard, or even the back of old pizza boxes. For Mia, every drawing was a spark against the darkness. It was proof that even if the world turned its back, she still existed by her ideals. Among the sketches Mia carried with her, there was one she always kept in a separate plastic folder. Carefully wrapped like a treasure, the charcoal portrait of her mother. It was of a woman with long hair, a sad but gentle gaze, as if both giving advice and offering comfort. Mia had drawn this picture on the last night in their old house, the night they didn't expect to be the last time they'd be together. A fire, caused by a gas leak, spread so quickly that her mother didn't have time to escape. When the firefighters arrived, they could only pull Mia out in a panic. For a week after, she was like a lost soul, sitting in the hospital with lightly burned hands and a heart that had been scorched. After the funeral, when she returned from the burned house, the only thing Mia had managed to save was the stack of sketches under her bed, and among them, the portrait that had never been given to her mother. Since then, whenever Mia felt like giving up, she would take that picture out and look at it. It wasn't just a memory, it was a reminder. Her mother had once believed in her, once hoped she would live not just to exist, but to create something beautiful for the world. For her mother, Mia refused to quit. For that drawing, every day she sat in the old park corner, waiting for a small miracle to happen, as if hearing a whisper from her late mother, "Daughter, keep drawing. Don't stop." If you feel that this story has touched your heart, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next inspiring tales. At Heart Glow, we share stories about kindness, change, and valuable life lessons. Join our loving community and help us spread positive messages. That morning, the sky in New York wasn't as clear as usual. Gray clouds rolled in, sighing with the wind, carrying the cool air of a gloomy day. The park was empty, only a few people passing by before disappearing behind the dry trees. Mia sat on her usual wooden bench, laid out a cardboard sheet, pulled out some charcoal paper, and began sketching the first lines on a fresh page. The gentle breeze blew her hair, but she didn't bother to tie it up. At moments like these, she felt in tune with the world around her. Silently, about 10 minutes later, a stranger approached. He was an elderly man, tall and thin, with a slightly hunched back. He wore an old brown overcoat and a frayed knit cap. Unlike the homeless people Mia usually encountered, he looked clean but carried an air of sadness. Without a word, he quietly sat on the bench opposite Mia, a few meters away, hands resting on his wooden cane, as if accustomed to waiting. At first, Mia didn't pay much attention. She thought he was just an elderly man needing a rest. But 10 minutes passed, then 20, and he still sat motionless, not looking at his phone, not reading a newspaper, just watching her. Not staring, not scrutinizing, but a silent gaze full of contemplation. That look made Mia uneasy. She stopped drawing, glanced up, and inadvertently met his eyes. Those eyes, so deep and sad, made her heart drop. She didn't know why, but something about him made her unable to look away. The next hours passed in silence. The old man remained there, barely moving, only occasionally closing his eyes as if letting the wind sweep through his silvery hair. Even though he didn't draw attention or say anything, his presence seemed to slow down the space around them. Mia sensed that. She had grown used to solitude, used to drawing in the park with no one noticing. But today, there was someone sitting still, never taking his eyes off her, as though he were witnessing every stroke of her pencil, not with his eyes, but with a heart full of experience. Sometimes the wind blew strongly, causing his knit cap to shift, revealing his wrinkled forehead with a faint old scar. Mia considered asking if he was cold. But she stopped herself. The look in his eyes at that moment wasn't concerned with the cold, it was directed towards something far away, further than the trees, further than the park, as if he was reminiscing about a lost place. She saw him gently stroke his cane, as though it was something more than just a walking aid. On his face, there was no smile, no anger, just a quiet sorrow, a sorrow that needed no words, no understanding from others because it had lived within him for too long. Mia felt something choke in her chest. She didn't know who he was, where he came from, or why he sat there for hours just watching her draw. But one thing she knew for sure, those eyes had once loved something deeply and had lost it. Finally, Mia couldn't bear the silence any longer. Not because it was uncomfortable, but because she felt if she didn't say something now, she would lose something very special. She looked up, removed her old gloves, walked over to him, and gently asked, "I'm sorry. You've been sitting here since this morning. Are you waiting for someone?" The old man looked at her, his eyes showing a hint of surprise, then shook his head. "No. I'm just watching you draw." His voice was deep and hoarse, as though it hadn't been used in a long time. Mia smiled, slightly embarrassed. She didn't know why she kept going, but the words came out before she could think. Would you like to let me draw you? It'll only take a few minutes. I won't charge you. He looked at her intently, not with suspicion, but as though trying to understand why a young girl would want to spend time with an old stranger who had nothing special except his wistful eyes. After a few seconds of silence, he nodded slowly. All right. But only if you truly want to. Mia nodded, then ran to get some paper and pencils. She picked the best charcoal, one she only reserved for moments of special inspiration. She asked him to sit up straight, then began drawing, her hand trembling slightly. Not from the cold, but because she felt she was about to capture not just a face, but a story, a soul. As Mia focused on adding each detail to the paper, the space seemed to be filled with an uncommon peace. She didn't ask many questions, nor did she force him to speak. But there was something in the air that made both of them feel safe, as though they had known each other for a long time. Then, very softly, his voice broke the silence, slow and broken, like fragments of memories falling to the quiet ground. She loved portrait paintings, he said, his eyes not on Mia but gazing far into the gray sky. When she was younger, every time we went somewhere, she always asked me to take pictures. But she always said photos fade, only paintings keep the soul. Mia didn't interrupt. She just nodded slightly, continuing to sketch his nose, the deep wrinkles on his forehead, and the tiredness in his eyes. Each detail spoke for the things he hadn't said. He told her he had once dreamed of becoming a documentary filmmaker. He had even received a scholarship to pursue it but had to give it up when his father fell ill. I wanted to tell the real stories of anonymous people, like you now, sitting in this corner of the park. Who would think you could draw such soulful portraits? Mia smiled. For the first time, she felt someone truly saw her, not just as a girl wandering and drawing for a living, but as a real artist. He continued talking about his wife, who had passed away more than 10 years ago. His voice gradually softened, as though afraid that speaking loudly would shatter the memory. She was the only one who ever believed I could do something great. Even when I couldn't do anything at all. He paused for a long time, then whispered, to this day, I still see her sitting on the balcony, reading a book. It's always the evening sunlight shining on her hair. Mia gently gripped her charcoal pencil. She felt the unspoken loneliness surrounding him, the loneliness of those who have lived long and lost too much. After nearly 40 minutes, Mia finished the final touches. She gently blew away the charcoal dust on the paper, then stepped back to observe the entire portrait. She didn't try to make him look younger or more beautiful. On the contrary, she kept the deep wrinkles, the age spots, and especially his eyes that from the very beginning, she knew she had to capture with all her heart. These weren't just the eyes of an old man. They were the eyes of someone who had once loved deeply, once hoped, once lost, and was still searching for something in life. She turned the portrait towards him. It's done, sir. He slowly stood up, leaned on his cane, and when he saw the portrait, his body froze. His mouth opened as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. His eyes widened, then slowly blurred with tears. He raised his hand to cover his mouth, as though he couldn't believe what he was seeing. My God! He whispered, his voice cracking with the wind. Tears fell from his eyes. Slowly, silently, like a release of years of suppressed emotion through a drawing. It's been so long. He choked, I thought I couldn't cry anymore. Mia stood by, not saying a word. She knew that at this moment, words would be meaningless. She just stood still, as a witness to the most beautiful moment in a person's life, the moment they felt touched to their core. After giving him enough time to admire the portrait, Mia gently took an old piece of newspaper, carefully wrapped the drawing like a precious gift. She didn't use glue or plastic, she just tied it with a small piece of twine, the kind of string she always saved when she found it in convenience stores. When she finished wrapping it, she raised both hands and offered the portrait to him, not as a gift from an artist, but as an understanding between two souls. He took it with both hands, trembling as if holding something fragile that could disappear at any moment. "I want to give this to you," Mia said, her gaze so sincere that he had to stop and look at her again. "I don't want money. I just want you to know that someone sees you. Not just with their eyes, but with their heart." He bit his lower lip. After a moment, he whispered, "Thank you for this. I will never forget." Mia smiled, unsure of how to respond, but nodded slightly. She hadn't expected that a gray morning, a simple charcoal drawing, and an unplanned meeting could bring so much emotion. As he slowly walked away, disappearing behind the trees with the portrait tightly in his hands, Mia watched him go, feeling as though she had just finished drawing not just a face, but a door leading to memories, love, and someone who had once lived fully. The silver-bearded man Mia met in the park that day was actually not a homeless person like many others wandering around Los Angeles. He was William H. Grant, a name once featured on the cover of Forbes. The founder of the Grant Foundation, a multi-billion-dollar charity funding education, healthcare, and anti-poverty initiatives. To the media, he was a symbol of philanthropy and success. But behind that perfect exterior, there was another truth no one had ever known. William had been struggling with an inner crisis for years. He no longer believed in the growth numbers of the foundation, no longer felt pride when signing massive charity checks. Everything had gradually become meaningless when he realized he had become a symbol, but no longer a real person. The compliments, the handshakes, the long speeches at charity conferences, all of it made him feel lonely and disconnected. He began to question whether his kindness truly came from his heart, or if it was just a PR mechanism for the empire called Grant. And it was in the midst of falling into that pit of doubt that he chose to step away from the stage of his life for a while, by wandering the streets as an anonymous man. A life of wealth had once been William's dream, and he had achieved it, beyond anyone's imagination. But the higher he climbed, the more he felt like a fish trapped in a glass tank, where people came only to watch, take pictures, and praise, but no one truly listened. Everyone around him, from assistants to financial advisors to friendly journalists, seemed to be performing in a pre-written play. No one dared to ask how he was feeling. No one wanted to hear about his sleepless nights, or the emptiness he felt when looking at his bank balance without a trace of happiness. He felt he had lost his connection to real life, children's laughter, simple dreams, the tenderness of a stranger's gaze on the street. For a long time, he hadn't heard real stories, no one had cried in front of him, and no one had thanked him from the heart. Everything had been sealed behind the rich glass. And in that glittering glass world, William slowly became invisible. 3 years ago, during a sleepless night, William went into his luxurious closet, pulled out an old sweater from his college days, and put it on. He looked at himself in the mirror and suddenly burst into tears. It was the first time he saw a familiar face in the mirror, not a billionaire, not a symbol, but a young man who once believed in humanity. Since that night, William developed a strange habit: he would disappear from the world for a few days each month. No assistants, no drivers, no security. Just him, a small backpack, a few old clothes, a little cash, and the identity of Walter, an old homeless man no one paid attention to. He walked the dusty streets, ate a $5 sandwich in the park, listened to street music, and talked to those who had nothing to lose. At first, it was just a way for him to escape. But gradually, he realized that this was the only way to reconnect with the truth of life. Every time he heard an elderly person talk about being abandoned by their children or a young girl playing the guitar in the cold wind, his heart would ache, as if a part of him that had died was awakening. And it was on such a day that William met Mia. When Mia handed him the portrait, William had intended to refuse, just as he had with anyone who tried to give him something. But the girl's gaze, gentle and sincere, without a hint of pity. The charcoal portrait wasn't as sharp as the oil paintings hanging in his house, but there was something about it that made him stand still. The more he looked, the more he realized the face in the drawing didn't resemble the man he was now, it looked more like the man he had been 50 years ago. There was a deep sadness, an undeniable weariness, but also a glimmer of light in the eyes. And then, memories flooded back. The image of his little daughter, only 7 years old at the time, sitting in the garden drawing him. "Can you look at me, Dad?" she had asked while he was on the phone discussing contracts. He hadn't looked up. He had kept that childish drawing all these years but had never truly looked at it. Today, Mia's charcoal sketch made his heart ache, not only because it was so realistic, but because it silently questioned, "Have you lived true to yourself?" That afternoon, William returned to his magnificent mansion on the hills of Beverly Hills. The bodyguards greeted him with concerned looks. And his assistant talked non-stop about the emails that needed replies. But he silently walked up to his office, still holding the charcoal portrait wrapped carefully in a paper bag. He hung it on the wall, amidst the awards, medals, and prestigious portraits. It was small, rough, but it caught every eye. And every time he looked up at it, he could hear Mia's voice echo in his head, "I just wanted you to know that someone sees you." Strangely enough, no one had ever said that to William H. Grant, the man whom the whole world was watching. Everyone saw the billionaire, the founder, the speaker, but no one saw the man. Only one poor girl, in an empty park, looked at him with eyes free of prejudice, exploitation, and fear. It was that gaze, and those words, that kept him awake that night. Night fell in the vast mansion, but in William's office, the lights remained on. He sat at his desk, opening a journal he hadn't written in for a long time. His hands trembling, he flipped through the old pages, full of work notes, plans for expanding the foundation, schedules for meetings with politicians. But today, for the first time in many years, he wrote something not for others, but for himself. "Maybe I haven't died inside," he wrote slowly, tears falling on the paper. "Maybe I can still do something meaningful, not with money, but with my heart." He sat there for a long time, his hand on his chest, as if trying to feel if his heart still beat for something other than duty. And in that moment, he realized, he was still alive. Not as a symbol, but as a person who could love, feel, and change. Thanks to a portrait. Thanks to a girl named Mia. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next inspiring stories. At Heart Glow, we share tales of kindness, change, and valuable life lessons. Join this loving community and help us spread positive messages. William H. Grant had been a well-known figure in the business and charity world, with his foundation having helped millions of impoverished people. However, as he prepared to launch his nationwide charity campaign, he felt an unusual emptiness. Although this campaign could create major financial and social changes, William sensed something was wrong. Everything felt distant, too abstract, and lacked a sincere connection with those who truly needed help. It seemed like a grand performance by the wealthy, people who could spend millions of dollars without ever truly understanding the struggles of the poor. Every step, every message, every event seemed like it was supporting a system of wealth that tried to hide the truth, that those who needed help most were often those without a voice. Up until then, William had always believed in charity through financial means, helping others through large funds and grants that could change the lives of thousands. But after meeting Mia and seeing the painting she created for him, a sense of change began to grow within William. He started to feel that everything he was doing, while good, lacked the most important element, a connection with people. An understanding, and empathy for their circumstances. The next morning, the advisory board met to prepare for the campaign. The plans had been meticulously outlined, the communication strategies were set, and fundraising events were about to take place. However, William felt as if he were entering a foggy dream, where ideas seemed reasonable but lacked truth and emotion. He looked around at the faces of those who had always been with him, but now they all seemed dull, and he couldn't feel the truth in the plans they presented. Immediately, William asked the advisory board to stop. "We need to stop," he said, his voice serious and determined. "I don't want to proceed with a campaign just to make money or build a reputation. This is not a competition among the wealthy. It has to be something truly meaningful." The room fell silent, no one spoke, because they all knew that when William had made up his mind, nothing could change it. But none of them had expected him to make this decision, changing the entire strategy they had been working on for months. William didn't explain immediately. He simply added, "We need to change the message. There has to be a message that truly comes from the heart." The following day, William met with the advisory board to propose a bold idea. He said that the painting Mia had made for him should become the symbol of the new charity campaign. This wasn't a perfect piece of art by traditional standards, but it was a simple painting that held many deep meanings that he hadn't realized before. "This painting is not just an image," William said, his eyes filled with determination. "It's a reminder, a call for us to see the people around us, those we often overlook in our daily lives. The message of this campaign must be, see people, touch hearts. We cannot continue doing charity like other organizations, just giving money and turning away. We must truly connect with them. See them as real people." The advisory board was not happy with this change. They seemed worried and uncertain. "You really want to use a painting that wasn't done by a professional artist? And even an image of you disguised as a homeless person? Won't that undermine the credibility of the campaign?" One of the advisors spoke up. William responded firmly, "Yes. I want people to understand that if this campaign cannot touch the heart of someone like Mia, then it means nothing. This is the moment we have to change. If we don't, we're just putting on a fake performance." The reason the advisory board opposed this wasn't just because Mia's painting lacked professionalism, but because they worried that showing William in disguise would lower the value of the campaign. They believed a billionaire like William shouldn't appear in such an image, especially in the context of a major campaign he was preparing to launch. One of them even said, "If you want this campaign to succeed, we need a strong and clean image, not a scribbled painting from an amateur girl." However, William remained undeterred. He had thought carefully and knew this was the time to change everything. "If this campaign does not come from sincerity, from a deep understanding of the people we want to help, then I cannot continue to participate. We cannot change the world with money and empty words. We must change from within, from the heart. William stood up, his eyes shining with determination. We will use Mia's painting and the image of me in disguise. If this campaign cannot touch the hearts of the poor, if it cannot make them feel that they are valuable too, then it means nothing. The room fell silent. The advisors looked at each other, no longer daring to oppose him. Deep down, they understood that William had made his decision. This wasn't the first time he had shown such strong determination, but this time, it seemed like he had broken through all the barriers of being a billionaire surrounded by money and power. William didn't want to be someone who only helped others to show off his greatness. He wanted to be someone who could truly change the world with small, human actions. We must change the way we view charity. This is a fight not just for money, but for the connection between people, he said. And in the end, the advisory board agreed, though they still harbored doubts. But they knew that if this campaign succeeded, it would mark a turning point in how charity was viewed in America. After the debates and intense discussions, William's charity campaign was redesigned. Instead of focusing solely on large grants or glamorous events, the campaign would now focus on small but deeply human stories. The image of Mia, the girl who painted in the park, would be the symbol of the campaign. Stories of ordinary people living difficult lives but still holding on to kindness would be the main message of the campaign. William knew that, whether the campaign succeeded or not, at least he had found a way to change himself and what he had been doing all along. This journey wouldn't only help the poor, but it would also help William reconnect with his true self, a person who yearned for connection with others. The late autumn days in Los Angeles carried the chill of the approaching winter. Mia could feel the change in the air, and she knew that the park would no longer be an ideal place for painting in the coming months. Despite her passion for art, the harsh realities of life had left her with few options. Her charcoal sketches of passing strangers on blank sheets of paper had gradually become her only source of income. However, with winter drawing near, painting outdoors had not only become difficult but also dangerous due to the biting cold. Mia couldn't keep doing this much longer. She thought about leaving, perhaps finding a better shelter, at least a room that could keep her warm throughout the winter. But then, one day, as she was sitting in the park painting a portrait of an elderly man, a letter arrived. It was an invitation, with no clear introduction except the words, National Humanities Fund. At first, Mia thought it was just a prank. Who would send an invitation to a homeless girl, sitting in the park painting like her? She looked at the letter again and observed the difference in its presentation, serious. Formal, like an official invitation from a reputable organization. But what stunned her more was the photograph included in the envelope. It was the very portrait she had painted for William, the one he had held on to all this time. She couldn't believe her eyes. How could they know about her? How could her painting be included in this invitation? Mia flipped the letter over again, feeling a lump in her throat. She couldn't believe that a major organization like the National Humanities Fund would know about a homeless girl who only made a living by painting. She thought maybe this was a mistake, some glitch in their system. She looked at the photograph again, and there it was, the portrait of the elderly man she had painted for William in the park weeks ago. She couldn't understand why a nameless painting by a homeless artist would attract the attention of such a large organization. Mia placed the letter down on the table with trembling hands, her mind filled with questions without answers. Why her? How could her painting be a part of such a grand campaign? She thought about the difficult days. The nights spent sleeping outdoors, and making a living with her old charcoal pencil. All of that seemed so disconnected from wealthy people or large organizations like the National Humanities Fund. Mia didn't know what to make of it. Was this a scam, or just a misunderstanding? She closed her eyes, hoping that when she opened them, it would all turn out to be a dream. But when she opened her eyes, the letter was still there, with the image of the painting still staring at her, like an invitation she couldn't refuse. Mia stood up and walked out of the small room where she had been living for the past few weeks. Although the letter seemed very real, she still couldn't believe it. She stood outside the park, watching people walk by, wondering if someone was deceiving her. The feeling of doubt wouldn't let go of her, and she decided not to attend the event. But before she could decide to leave, a man appeared. He wore a well-tailored suit, but his appearance was nothing like the people she usually encountered in the park. He approached Mia and introduced himself as an employee of the National Humanities Fund. Still confused, Mia asked, "Who are you? How do you know me?" He smiled and answered patiently, "Ms. Mia, I'm from the National Humanities Fund. We received your invitation, and I just wanted to confirm with you that you'll be attending our event as an honored guest." Mia still couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Honored guest? Why me?" He nodded. "Because your painting has changed the course of a major charity campaign. We want you there." At this moment, Mia was speechless, unable to comprehend what was happening. She could only stand there, stunned, looking at him. Mia stood in front of the event center in Los Angeles, feeling like she was stepping into a completely different world. She had once been a homeless girl, living off her portrait sketches to get by. But now, she was standing in front of a door leading to a major event, where the rich and powerful gathered. She couldn't stop thinking about the difference between herself and them. For the first time in her life, Mia was wearing a beautiful dress. It wasn't an extravagant outfit, but for her, it was a gift she never thought she would have. A luxury car had come to pick her up, and as she sat inside, she felt like she was entering an unfamiliar world that she had never known. Yet, throughout the ride, she couldn't shake the strange and anxious feeling. She still carried her old charcoal pencil, her only companion since she had been a homeless girl on the streets. That pencil wasn't just a tool for drawing. It was the only thing that helped her hold on to a part of her true self, an artist, someone who could see and sketch the untold stories of others. When Mia entered the auditorium, she felt as though she had entered a completely different world. The lights were bright, the event participants were dressed elegantly, laughing and congratulating each other. But in that moment, Mia saw only one thing: her painting, the portrait she had painted for William, blown up and displayed at the center of the stage. She froze, feeling as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Her painting, once a simple piece of work, was now the focal point of the entire event. It wasn't just a painting, it was a symbol of a story, of change, of connection between different people. Mia couldn't believe that she was now a part of all of this. She couldn't understand why her painting had caused everyone in the auditorium to stop and look, as if they were gazing at something incredibly precious. When the room quieted and the event officially began, a man stood up, holding a microphone, and the audience fell silent, waiting for what he would say. Mia recognized him immediately. It was William. The man who had met her in the park, the man she never thought could become a part of her life. He smiled, looked toward Mia, and said, "We are here today not just to celebrate a work of art, but to honor a great artist. She doesn't sell her paintings, she gives her soul." William's words echoed in the space, and Mia couldn't believe what was happening. She wasn't a great artist, just an ordinary girl with a charcoal pencil and hand-drawn portraits in the park. But now, she had become a part of a much bigger story, a story about sharing, love, and connection. Mia stood on stage, under the bright spotlight, beside her giant painting, where all the attendees were intently watching. She still couldn't believe her eyes, being honored in front of thousands at such a grand event. But what surprised her wasn't the attention on her painting skills, but the appreciation for the compassion she had infused into every stroke. The painting she had made for the elderly man, William, though a simple piece of art, carried a profound message of humanity, empathy, and belief in the goodness of life. The hall was silent, the atmosphere was truly special. They weren't just looking at the charcoal lines in the painting, they were seeing a part of Mia's soul, a girl who once lived quietly in the shadows, now stepping into the light. She could feel every round of applause, every admiring glance. This wasn't a victory of artistic perfection, but a victory of kindness. Mia understood that sometimes, paintings don't just need to be beautiful, they need to carry truth and sincerity from the artist's heart. In that moment, she no longer felt out of place under the stage lights, no longer felt small. She felt her worth. After the honor ceremony, many people came to Mia to express their admiration and affection. Stories about her spread quickly, not only because of her artistic talent but also because of the humanitarian message she conveyed. Mia had become an inspiration to many, showing them that no matter where you come from, if you have a sincere heart, you can change the world. When Mia's painting became a symbol of compassion, William was no longer just an audience member, he became a supporter, creating opportunities for Mia to develop her art. After the ceremony ended, he stood up and announced an important decision. "We need street artists like Mia. They not only have talent but also possess a vast, compassionate soul. That's why I've decided to establish a scholarship program specifically for artists like her. Those who come from difficult circumstances but still believe in the power of art." William declared that the Street Artist Scholarship program would provide full financial support for artists from all walks of life to have the chance to return to their studies and develop their talents. And the first recipient of the scholarship was none other than Mia, the girl who had touched the hearts of millions. Mia stood there, speechless, astonished. This was an opportunity she had only dared to dream about during the long nights of drawing in the park. But now, that opportunity had arrived, and she could pursue the art degree she had abandoned when she was younger. She sat down, not out of fear or surprise, but because she understood that everything in life happens for a reason. The hardships and struggles she had endured were not by chance. They were life lessons, helping her understand her self-worth and the power of small actions. Mia knew that this was an opportunity for her not only to rebuild her life but also to help others, street artists like herself, have a better future. Once Mia's story was shared across the media, it quickly spread throughout the United States. The story of "The Girl and the Charcoal Painting" became an inspirational phenomenon. People from big cities to suburbs knew of the homeless girl who created a humanitarian piece of art. Mia's story was not just about artistic talent, but also about sincerity, kindness, and how a person could change their life, and the lives of others, through small actions. Mia's kindness became a powerful message, inspiring millions to act with compassion. Charitable organizations, programs supporting street artists, and community projects suddenly gained prominence, and many people began taking action to change the circumstances of those living in the shadows. Mia's story made people realize that sometimes, the simplest things in life can create monumental change. A painting made from the heart. A small yet meaningful gesture, could capture the world's attention and help those who need to be seen. Mia didn't just change her life, she made society change. With the scholarship she received, Mia not only focused on studying art but also wanted to do something to help homeless children she had once met on the streets. She decided to open a free drawing space for poor children, children who had no access to art. Mia wanted them to have a place to create freely, express their emotions, and find joy in the pictures they drew. She called this space the Seeing Place. At the Seeing Place, there was no discrimination, no barriers of family background or life circumstances. All children could come, learn to draw, express themselves through strokes, and find an escape from hardship. Mia knew that art could heal the soul, and she wanted to give them a chance to grow. The children who came here not only learned to draw, but also learned to view life from a positive perspective and believe in their future. Mia devoted herself to each class, and what made her happiest was seeing the children smile. Happily drawing, growing in confidence every day. The Seeing Place became a sanctuary, a place where the children found faith in themselves and were seen, not only by those around them but by themselves. Despite his busy schedule, William remained by Mia's side throughout her journey. He wasn't just the founder of the scholarship program, he was a reliable friend. William didn't need to show up often or do grand gestures, he was simply there, offering support and sharing his life experience with Mia. Together, they planned their first exhibition titled, Art from the Streets, where Mia and other street artists could showcase their talents. The exhibition attracted the attention of the public, investors, and art lovers. Mia's works, which vividly and powerfully depicted street life, were loved and highly appreciated by the community. This exhibition wasn't just an art event, it was a campaign to raise awareness about the value of street art and the creativity of unknown artists. Day by day, Mia returned to the old park, where she once sat and drew portraits for passers-by. But this time, everything was different. She no longer felt alone or abandoned. In her eyes, there was confidence and self-belief. The paintings she drew were no longer just simple strokes, they were messages of humanity, empathy, and compassion. Mia smiled as she continued to draw a portrait of a homeless person sitting next to her. She understood that art wasn't just about capturing an image, it was about recording emotions and lives. And with each stroke, she was healing souls, just as art had healed her own. The story of Mia, the homeless girl with a wide-open heart and hidden artistic talent, is a living testament to the power of compassion and perseverance. From a street portrait artist, Mia became a beacon of inspiration, changing not only her own life but also spreading hope and kindness to millions. But her journey isn't just the story of an artist, it's about the power of art and how small actions can change the world. Mia had gone through many challenging days, but now, she was a symbol of resilience and love. Her strokes didn't just capture faces, they told a story of change, of people learning to see each other and share affection without discrimination. When Mia sat in the old park again, the portraits she drew were no longer just artworks, they were messages of empathy and humanity. A smile, a small gesture, could be the salvation for a lost soul. And that's what Mia brought to the world, a light not only through art but through kindness, patience, and the belief that no matter where you are, you can change your life and the lives of those around you. If you felt the power of this story, let Heartglow continue to inspire you and those around you. Join us on a journey to spread truly meaningful stories, small actions that can change the world. Don't forget to hit follow to receive more wonderful stories about kindness, resilience, and the power of humanity. Together, we can create miracles, just like Mia did. We can repaint the world, one picture full of love and hope. Let Heartglow be the torch that leads the way, taking you on a new journey full of inspiration.